This was an explosive day in Washington. The Trump Attorney General, Pam Bondi, at turns was defensive, lashing out on the attack, doing talking points, even getting personal. And for all the skepticism or cynicism in our country right now, for understandable reasons, her situation, being under oath, having to discuss a topic that she spent a long time trying to dodge on, and a president who tried to fight the very law she is now tasked with carrying out, all of this speaks to how some things are still working. She couldn't dodge the Congress forever, just as they couldn't hide the documents forever. The documents, of course, being the Epstein files, and the testimony comes as we have many serious questions. Why is Donald Trump in the files so many times, apart from being a public figure who is sometimes mentioned in articles? Why was his name redacted repeatedly? Are all the redactions on the level or not? Will the Trump official who spent years lying about his ties to Epstein and only from these files now admitted visiting Epstein Island face any accountability? And how does all of this impact the survivors who've been through, of course, more than enough, but who've also been proven right repeatedly? Right about how the government has failed them, right about how this process didn't work, right about how transparency, which can be complicated, that's why we have grand jury secrecy rules and other valid ways that confidentiality matters, but transparency can be a way to get public accountability, which they didn't get, which failed them through the other more traditional means. I mention them because not only are they, of course, the victims in this long-running case, but many of them chose, Epstein survivors, to attend this hearing today. They asked why the redactions seemed at times to mistakenly, erroneously, or they question, nefariously cover up information not as intended in the law, which had narrow redaction rules, for example, protecting children or minors, which no rational person or lawyer would disagree with or has disagreed with. But why, instead of those narrow redactions under law, why did some redactions appear to, and now lawmakers have said after reviewing them they did, hide powerful potential co-conspirators, rich and powerful men? Why were the redactions being, they ask, abused that way? That led to one key moment.
Will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done.
Members get to ask the questions, the witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer. The Attorney General can
that's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she doesn't like the answer.
Time.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
why
I have asked
didn't she ask Merrick Garland this twice?
I am reclaiming my time, and when I reclaim my time, it is
Mr. Chairman, the gentlelady's reclaimed her time.
I'm not going to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
The time belongs to the gentlelady. The gentlelady has 17 seconds.
Thank you. You're not going to answer this question, so let me just
Chairman,
say this.
I'll direct it to
what
you.
a massive cover-up.
No, I'm answering a question.
Chairman, will you restore her time? The witness is interrupted.
I'm not going to get in the gutter with this woman.
Stop the
She's
time
doing theatrics.
and let me.
You can see the intensity of the moment with the back and forth. The Congresswoman saying, this is what the survivors deserve, and can you face them? The chair, kind of off video, you couldn't see him, trying to keep some sort of order, which happens a lot in these hearings, the survivors present, and the Attorney General arguing, basically, if you can infer from her answer, that she didn't think she owed only the survivors something, that this goes back farther, that there are other parts of the government and other prior administrations that also bear accountability. Fact check, true, because this is bigger than just the last couple years. Anyone who's followed the story knows that. And yet, even if it is true that other prior government officials also bear some blame, at least according to the lawmaker there and others who've looked at this, the question is, why can't the Attorney General step up now? She is the Attorney General now. Survivors, some were seen wearing shirts that say the truth is redacted, redacted, redacted. Epstein survivors are still waiting. Release the redacted files. This is a kind of visual cue that is recognizable from the hearing room to the internet to the memes, because so many people across the spectrum have been outraged by the way this Trump DOJ has redacted. A Democrat who saw some of the unredacted files has said there were over 1 million mentions of Trump, which is far more than in the publicly released files, which mentioned Trump a far fewer number of times. And if some of the million mentions were duplicates, or as I mentioned in fairness, references to a public person, Trump, a longtime celebrity and later a politician, there is still a huge gap and big questions. Trump Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. It is only these files, which Trump and Bondi tried to hide, that have forced him to admit that he was lying when he said he cut off contact with Epstein. We were reporting on this before he even was forced to admit it. Many outlets, of course, as I've mentioned, and we credit and source them, have been reporting and pulling on these threads. He visited the Epstein Island in 2012. Epstein had already been, by then, a publicly convicted sex offender, which undercuts his prior claim.
Attorney General Bondi, yes or no, has the Justice Department asked Secretary Lutnick about his ties to Epstein?
Excuse me. Secretary Lutnick has addressed those ties himself.
I'm asking you, has the Justice Department specifically asked Secretary Lutnick about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein?
He has addressed those ties himself.
It's true. But when he first addressed those ties, he lied. And he held on to that lie for many years. And it's only this week, after the files were forcibly pushed out under the law, that he had to address it again and say he was lying and admit he visited. Bondi also was asked about Maxwell, who got that prison upgrade, which occurred after Bondi's number 2, Todd Blanche, conducted a very unusual interview with Maxwell. You don't have to be an expert on any of this to wonder why someone who is serving for such heinous crimes would ever get a prison upgrade, especially right after that interview, which led many to ask whether it was causal or some sort of reward. The Bureau of Prisons, which is under the DOJ and transferred Maxwell, reports in the end to the Attorney General.
Who ordered her to be transferred to the minimum security prison that she was ineligible for? Who signed off on the special privileges? Was it Mr. Blanche? Was it one of your other subordinates? So please, can you tell us who sent her there, since you don't agree she should be there?
I said I do not agree she should receive special treatment. She was transferred, I learned after the fact, to the same level facility, and that is a question for the Bureau of Prisons. I was not involved in that at all. The same level facility, I don't know why.
Fact check, less than true, dodgy at best, because even if Bondi was not previously involved, she is the Attorney General. She remains involved by the nature of her job, unless, of course, there is some rare situation like you are formally recused from some part of BOP or DOJ. That's not the case. So she's involved right now. If she thinks this was the wrong transfer, if she thinks it looks like or constitutes any kind of reward or special treatment for this convicted sex offender, she can move her back. So it's not enough to say you didn't know back then. Otherwise, people can also ask whether they believe all this, right? We've reported on people lying. Bondi's been caught with misstatements about the very Epstein matter before. This is not some random thing. This is the DOJ's job to oversee, detain, punish people in the Bureau of Prisons. That's what the entire federal prison system is. Now, this was not specific to just that moment. Across the hearing, we saw Bondi, who may still be fighting for her job, given the many problems she's faced around the Epstein files and her own misstatements, trying a sort of Trumpian effort to dodge, to deflect, to bring up unrelated issues, to say things that she thinks are positive for the Trump administration but aren't really responsive to the questions, and at times just hurling insults.
How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No, you're going to answer the question the way I asked.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch.
Reclaim
not
it?
on our time. No way.
Reclaim
and I
it?
told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, oh, I
anything,
did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
I'm
if they're not
talking.
privileged,
Quiet.
Don't yell at me. I want the record to reflect that, with this anti-Semitic culture right now, she voted against a resolution condemning.
Oh,
is
Jewish.
I
just want to be clear.
Do you want to go there, Attorney General? Or do you want to go there? Are you serious? Talking about anti-Semitism to a woman who lost her grandfather in the Holocaust? Really?
And on it went. If you see clips like that, you may understand why the news isn't going to run huge parts of that hearing, because some of it, at just the level of being able to listen to it, became heated, if not at times nonsensical. So that's enough of the hearing for this moment. I want to make sure we keep an eye on what we're learning. There were references today, and we played some of them, to the question asked, what about the other co-conspirators? And there were references to Lutnick and others exposed by these files. Those things matter more than the fireworks. I want to show you what we've gleaned from the files around the time the DOJ had Epstein as an indicted defendant, because they had their inner circle identified. Only one of these individuals, as everybody just about knows by now, Maxwell, has been convicted. Now, because the names appear in the files does not mean any of them have committed any criminal wrongdoing. But that is the start of the threads we're pulling on. Here you have a much wider group of names. You go through the rest of this list, these are not all household names, but they do show that both before the full file release and now as we continue to go through it, there are consequences, investigative pursuits, information continuing to come out. That matters as much or more than the fire in the hearings and some of the politics surrounding it, because there is a process, however long delayed, to try to get to the bottom of the information and the accountability for the people in these files. And as you see, so many of them turn out to be rich, powerful, well-connected men.